There is never an excuse for violence against police or for those who would use this tragedy as a cover for vandalism or looting. There's also no excuse for police to use excessive force against peaceful protests.
The president there speaking out publicly for the first time about the situation and the violence that has rocked the community of Ferguson, Missouri this week over the shooting death of unarmed teenager Michael Brown. Overnight, that city finally saw calm after the state highway police stepped in. Joining us this morning to sort through some of the issues, Mo Ivory, attorney and radio personality, and my colleague CNN anchor Don Lemon, who is on the ground there in Ferguson and has seen how things have changed in tone overnight. And in fact, Don, why don't we start with that? I don't think it can be said enough that it is a very different morning that Ferguson is waking up to than just a few days ago.
Oh, absolutely. Very different morning. And last night, as you said, a very different night. And when I got here on the scene, I had to tell you, I expected something much different. I thought it would be a lot more volatile and as tensions were high. And then yesterday, I was greeted. People were happy that I was here. And I saw the man who is now in charge of this investigation as we rolled up here yesterday, actually out with protesters, Michaela and Mo. Out with protesters, hugging them, marching with them, saying, you know what, I have community ties here. I'm from this community. I know you. I feel your pain. I can relate to you. That made a huge difference in the way people reacted.
Mo, in a way, it strikes me as a surprise that it took so long to do this. It seems like Policing 101, get into the community, talk to folks. It doesn't surprise you, or does it?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all, Michaela, because this is a problem that is rampant throughout our country. You know, people that are just not experienced or respectful or compassionate enough to go into the community. The difference that State Patrol Highway Ronnie Johnson made is that he has compassion for this community. He also decided to allow them to communicate their feelings to him, and he listened, and he got in the crowd. A lot of people will say, well, oh, it was because he's black and he got in there and they respected him automatically. No, it was because he came from the beginning with respect for the community, respect for the situation, and that is something that we had not seen in Ferguson over the last 5 days. That's what made the difference.
Yeah, but
Don, I want to
Mo and
go
Michaela,
ahead,
Mo. It does make a difference. I think it does make a difference that he's African American in the sense because this is a city that is the majority of the city is African American, and the majority of the police force is white. This speaks to how important diversity is when it comes to all facets of life, not just in policing. So I think it helps to see someone who looks like them in a position of power, in a position of authority, and someone who can relate to them. Listen, last night, the protest lasted till about 2 or 3 in the morning, and guess what? Most of the police officers went home, and the community leaders took over. All the people really wanted to do was to be heard and to vent and to let off some steam, Michaela.
Yeah, and Don, I agree with that it probably made a difference, but I don't think that a white officer couldn't have come with those same skill sets.
Oh, absolutely.
And the training, the compassion, the respect, and that's what was missing from the beginning with Ferguson Police Department.
I want to bring in the comments from the president. There have been those that have said that they wanted to hear from the president. Many have agreed that he would, or were hoped that he might make some comments that would have a bit of a personal nature in the same way that he did when Trayvon Martin was killed. He spoke very emotionally and personally about that. He also got a great deal of criticism. Some people saying, Don, that, you know, he was directly speaking to African Americans instead of the whole nation. In a way, some are now criticizing the president that he didn't do more. Some black critics saying we need him to do something substantive here and address this ongoing issue of policing in our communities. Damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, in a way.
Right.
Yeah, right. It is. And what is wrong with speaking to certain groups certain groups of Americans when we have the crisis at the border, when we have the kids who are, you know, who were going through awful events coming over the border? What is wrong with speaking to the Hispanic population? What's wrong with speaking to African Americans if African Americans are in crisis in this country? What's wrong with speaking to women if women are in crisis in this country? Yes, it is damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, but he got so much criticism from Trayvon when he made the remarks about Trayvon Martin saying, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon. People are saying, oh my gosh, he's only speaking to black people. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If he is the one person in this country who has the authority to speak to black people, it should be the first black president of the United States.
Mo, what more do you think he needs to do, though?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that Eric Holder at the Justice Department needs to, pay attention to not just Ferguson. Ferguson is Staten Island. Ferguson is Sanford, Florida. Ferguson is New York City. There's so many police departments that have these problems. So I think that it's a national situation to deal with the state individual police departments, and that's what I think Eric Holder can do. He can make more of a focus. The president can put dollars towards making sure that the states can begin to revamp their police departments. Like that chief of police in Ferguson, he's got to go. And that's how it has to start happening. There have to be heads chopped in order for people to understand that this can no longer go on. And they need a team of people to do that on a federal level.
Don, I want to leave the final thought with you. Let me ask you, in terms of the difference overnight, I'm wondering what people on the ground in Ferguson are saying about the reaction from the president, from the governor. What is the overall tone in that respect about what outside authorities and leaders are saying?
Well, just as people said they wanted the president to speak up sooner, they wanted the governor to speak up sooner as well, and they wanted the governor to come here. But I think people have largely by now put those events behind them, and now they're looking forward to the future. But the important thing that we have to realize here is that just because the protests overnight were not violent, the only thing that they really had was some fireworks. That doesn't mean that the issues have been addressed here. That doesn't mean that racism in this community has been addressed. And it doesn't mean that we don't need to, and that meaning we, as a country, as Mo said, that we don't need to address the issues when it comes to the disconnect between the police department and young men, and especially men of color in this country. Those things still need to be addressed. And now there's a way forward.
Quick
right,
last
and they figured out how to make a difference in Ferguson overnight by bringing in a new team that was equipped to handle the situation. That needs to happen much earlier on in all of these situations that happen in the different cities.
Mo Ivory, Don Lemon.
Not being in riot gear, made a huge difference. Something else we need to look at is people who look like the police officers who look like they are members of the military. That should not happen in cities and states across the country.
Mo, Don, thanks so much for a great conversation. We'll keep watching this. As you mentioned, this situation has been diffused, but the problems underlying it have not been addressed, and we have